Andrew is angry, and he wants everybody to know about it. The downward thrust of his eyebrows, the piercing look of his eyes, the stomping of his feet are all designed for you to ask him, what's wrong? And oh, if you do, get ready, because he's got a speech ready to deliver. And with what he imagines to be a skilled oratory masterpiece. But to everyone else's ears, it's just noisy complaining. Andrew can't understand why everyone around him is incompetent, too busy, too complacent. Why, if everyone would just be more like him, the world would be a better place. Morgan is sick again. Seems like this always happens to her. She's got something. It must be new because the doctors say they can't find anything wrong with her. It must be a new strain of something. After spending some time on the internet typing in her symptoms, she's narrowed it down to bubonic plague, rigor mortis, or she might have caught a cold from that lady she saw coughing on TV. She's seen all the doctors and been to all the specialists. But every time she gets better, she seems to find herself right back in the hospital. Why does this keep happening? Byron knows he's got to go home sometime, but just one more beer first. He'll say he's just hanging out with his friends or his co-workers, but he's really just avoiding going home. His wife has tried to talk to him about this, how he's been so distant lately. But truthfully, he doesn't even know how to talk to her anymore. So he just doesn't try. He buries himself in his work, buries himself in a glass, or in stone-cold silence. And he wonders, why does his family not seem to be as happy as it used to be? Now, believe it or not, all the people that I just mentioned have the same core problem. They can all be asked the same tough question that Jesus asked the sick man in John chapter 5. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" Now that's quite a loaded question, isn't it? It's simple to understand the question, but there's a lot of wisdom in Jesus' question. Does this guy want to get well? Now let's think back to some of our stories from before. Let's start with Andrew. You see, people do certain behaviors because there's some sort of payoff. Now they may not always be consciously aware of why they're doing these things, but there is a reason. Why do you think Andrew stomps around angrily until somebody notices him and asks what's wrong, and then he goes off on a tirade? Well, the hint was in the question, wasn't it? Andrew has now been noticed and heard, and maybe that's all he wants. Maybe he feels like nobody listens to him. He's frustrated about something. And when he goes off on his hatred for the government, some people group, the high price of fuel, his anger isn't really about any of these one things. There's something deeper going on in here. But he isn't looking about his part in all of this. He doesn't want himself to change. Make everybody else change. Does Andrew want to get well? No. He wants everybody else to accommodate his behavior. Now how about Morgan? Surely there must be something wrong with her that the doctors just haven't found under a microscope. Now notice how I said that as soon as she gets better, she goes right back to being sick, right? Because that's her normal. And this doesn't just have to be about perceived physical ailments. We can observe these in families too, not just the individual, but an entire family. Just when everything seems fine, there can be that one family member that does something crazy. I like what Jeff Foxworthy says. It says, if you think that you don't have a crazy person in your family, maybe it's you. As odd as it may seem, sometimes people will gravitate back to what they're used to, even when what they're used to is unhealthy. He starts drinking again. She starts spending all their money on QVC, and now they can't pay the mortgage. We ask, what's the payoff to these behaviors? Well, in Morgan's case, it could be to get attention. It could be to score painkillers. We know that's a big epidemic in our country, and specifically, we've talked about that in Rocky Mount, the Sheriff's Department has. Sadly, we know that sometimes children will fake an illness, and it's not that the child is actually sick, that it's because of something like their parents fighting. And then the child says that they're sick, and now suddenly the parents aren't fighting because they're attending to the child, and that can be a defense mechanism there. Does Morgan want to get well? Maybe, or maybe not. And what about Byron, who'd rather avoid being real and just act like there isn't a problem? He would say he wants things to get better. He would say he wants his family to be happy, but he's not hanging around to make that happen. Does he really want to be well? Or is it more comfortable to keep the status quo as it is, even if it's not good? Now, as I've gone over some of these examples, you might have thought of some other people. You might have said, oh, that's just like so-and-so. They have some real problems. But what about you? Do you find yourself in any of these examples? And maybe we didn't touch on your specific scenario, so let me ask this a little bit more generally. What in your life is unhealthy? Now, you might point out some physical things, and certainly that can apply, but I mean more issues of your heart, issues of your soul. What inside of you is unhealthy? And if you stop and you're really honest, you know it needs to change, but you don't want to. Maybe if you could just snap your fingers and be better, you would do that. I'm sure if someone could come up with a diet plan where you just snap your fingers and you lose all the weight, they'd be a millionaire, a billionaire. But most change doesn't happen that easily, does it? It takes work. Healthy alternatives to what you were doing. Having a plan and sticking to it. And that's not just with weight loss. That's also with the unhealthy parts that are inside of us that just need to go. But it's much easier to make excuses. When Jesus asked the question of this man by the pool, listen to what he says in response. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Now, I'm not trying to say that this man in this particular context is making excuses. He seems like he has a valid complaint. He's paralyzed. He can't get himself down. But what this does make me think about is when Jesus confronts us with our desire, do we really want to change? How often we might have excuses that are not as good as what this guy says. We're not paralyzed. We could move, but do we really want to change? When this guy wants to get into the water, see that in the context of this blessing, the first person in the water gets the blessing. If somebody else beats him to the water, he can't get that blessing. So he's wanting to get down to the water, he's got nobody to help him get down there, someone else gets down in front of him and blocks his way. Steals the blessing, it seems. Now I wonder if any of you have ever wanted to change, you wanted healing, but stuff got in the way. Do you want to get well? We might, if we're honest, we might say to ourselves, well, not if it means I have to work really hard at it. Not if it means I'm going to have to change my whole way of life. Certainly not if it means admitting that I was wrong. And not if it means giving up what I'm getting by staying put. I'm getting something out of staying put and doing what I'm doing. I don't want to give that up. That's my status quo. That's what I'm comfortable with, even when we're most used to and most comfortable with that which is unhealthy. In verse 8, then Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. This morning, Jesus wants to heal you too. Are we sitting by the pool, afraid to dip our toe in? Afraid of what change might mean in our lives? Do we want to be well? Now, depending on the translation of this verse that you read, it might say, do you want to be made whole? So you can go about your status quo. You can refuse to change. You can refuse to be changed by God. And you might think that's working for you. But something's missing, isn't it? And maybe you can feel that. And if you're you're ready to give up what is unhealthy for that which is healthy, Jesus can do a new work in you if you want it. Now, I know things might have gotten your way in the past. People might have gotten your way. And you might think, if I just had some help. But this morning, Jesus is reaching out his hand to you. He is ready to help you. So no more excuses. He's telling you to get up and to walk into his will, to walk into his healing. And if you feel Jesus calling you this morning to get up and to make a decision for him, we ask that you please come forward as we sing this final song. You can be well today. You can trust Jesus to do it, and I'd love to pray with you. If you feel led to join us in membership in this church, we would love to be the kind of help that lifts you up and takes you to the healing waters of God. It's easier to walk the walk when you do it with others. And we would love to have you join us. Whether prayer for yourself or for someone else, won't you please come forward as you were led as we sing this final song.